I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blimke.
And you're listening to the podcast for friendlyatheist.com. You can now listen to these podcasts and all of our old ones and see show notes at the newly designed friendlyatheistpodcast.com. Parisa Tabriz is Google's self-described security princess, a euphemism she created in part because hired hacker sounds kind of evil. Her job is to figure out the problems with Google Chrome, the web browser, and fix them before the bad guys do. And that's a pretty amazing job for anyone, much less a 31-year-old woman, which isn't exactly the norm in the tech world. Last July, Elle magazine ran a really long and excellent profile on her, which you could see in the notes for this podcast below. And full disclosure, I knew Parisa in high school. We had classes together, though we haven't talked too much since graduating. So this will be fun for both of us, I hope. And so, Parisa, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm definitely excited and a fan of the podcast in New Hemet. So
thanks.
This is exciting.
So is it weird that I've seen your name pop up a lot, not just on Facebook, because our friends are really proud of you, but is it weird kind of becoming a de facto spokesperson for women in tech? I mean, that's not exactly the job you signed up for, but it's one you have now.
It is really weird, and it's especially weird when people come up to me and they say, I know you, or you're famous, because I definitely don't feel famous. It's flattering to be a spokesperson and, profiled in positive ways. But it definitely feels weird. And I still feel quite awkward about owning up to that. So I try to just get to know people and hope that they know me versus, what they may be expecting from some media outlet.
Well, I'm really curious. There's a lot of talk about the problem with women in the tech world and things like that, and kind of parallels what I think Hemant and I have heard about the problems with women and minorities and kind of the atheist movement thing.
It's an old white guy movement,
right? And as a woman in the movement, and I can't speak for Hemant, as a minority in the movement, I feel like, it's regular. I'm just a person who's part of this. Do you feel the same way, or do you feel very much like I am the woman in the tech movement?
I don't. So, I get asked a lot about what is it like being a woman in tech, or to ask for, and to speak kind of on behalf of all women. And yeah. I feel like I can speak on behalf of myself, and I certainly have opinions about diversity in the field. I think diversity is important, and I think there should be more women, and I know that I would look forward to more women in the field, as well as just the more, diversity across ages working in tech and ethnicities. The tech world in Silicon Valley is more of a, 20, 30-year-old white guy space. So I think diversity is important just because it means we can actually build better software and better solutions for the really diverse user base that we're trying to do. For Chrome, we have over a billion users, all of which are not 30-year-old white men. So
right.
I think it's important to just build better software. But I can definitely speak on behalf of my own experiences, but I do feel that I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of all women. I think I have had some bad experiences. Like I remember in college, someone telling me that I got my job because I was a woman, and that definitely, makes me really question kind of what is being unsaid. But I've also had, a lot of luck and positive experiences. And despite the fact that most of my colleagues, are men, it's not something that I think about on a daily basis.
Hemant, you told me that we're going to have a guest who is going to be able to speak on behalf of all women in tech.
That is
so
exactly
I'm not
what
sure
I said.
if we should continue this
No, I'm going to get this out of the way now because I know people are going to want us to ask this anyway. What can we do to get more women interested in tech?
So I think
free tampons.
Having me on a podcast and having other women just kind of speak about their experiences is actually a really powerful thing. I've done a lot of speaking and working with students and conferences, and I'm always, surprised when a girl will come up to me, or a father that has a daughter will come to me and say, I never knew that I could do this job. I never even had considered this. And I think one of the problems with, there not being enough women in tech is we just don't have, it's very hard to visualize this. I was lucky, and I actually just kind of tripped into this major and field, and it wasn't something that I knew about when I was in grade school or high school. So I can't really say that there was a ton of foresight in me picking this. I think the fact that probably more women can imagine themselves being a doctor or a lawyer just makes it something that they consider, and we're not yet there in the tech space. So I think really just getting kind of positive role models out there and more exposure can help. I like to, I'm involved with some STEM, so this is science, technology, engineering, and management, and math. And I'm involved with some STEM activities with girls in junior high and high school. One of the kind of more powerful experiences I had was participating in a hacker conference where we were teaching kids how to get into web security and find, holes in software so that they could ultimately, fix them and make the internet safer. And the age range for the kids at this conference were 14 and under. Most of the kids were around 12. And it was a split 50-50, between girls and boys. And the girls were just as, active in participating and asking questions. And that is so different than what I experienced actually as an adult in the industry and at different conferences. So I feel like there's something that's happening, during adolescence that's,
something
really
steering women away from the field that we got to fix.
Yeah. And I think I don't have the silver bullet answer, but I think, what I'm trying to do, what I encourage other people to do is, if you know a woman in technology, or if you know girls that are interested in math and science, talk to them about what they could possibly do with that as a career, because I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities. I remember when I was really young, I wanted magic powers, and at some point I realized, okay, I wasn't going to have like X-Men magic superpowers, but I really do believe that engineering and computer science and learning how to program, it lets you create things that you envision that, a lot of people didn't think were possible. Working at Google, I've seen self-driving cars and people fitting computers into eyeglasses and these things which, we saw in futuristic movies. So
and you get to be on the ground floor of that, which is really neat.
Yeah. And so I feel like it is such an exciting field, and it may just not be that it may be the case that those opportunities just aren't, presented or considered to girls earlier in school. So I think that's something that everybody can do.
So how did you get involved in this? Because like you said, if you asked me in high school what you would do in the future, hacking isn't on my list. So what happened in college that got you on this path?
Yeah. So I definitely did not know anything about computers before college. I actually picked my major a little bit randomly. So I wanted to go to an in-state school, and I liked math and science in high school. So, my dad and friends were like, well, why don't you try engineering? Because University of Illinois had a really strong engineering program.
Right.
Why not? Seems easy.
So I started in engineering, and I've actually always liked art classes. And I realized that, one thing that would be interesting to learn how to do is to do web design and learn how to create web pages. So I learned HTML and JavaScript in my spare time in the dorm rooms, and it was a great way to make art. And it's cheap. You didn't need any equipment. It was free because you could make web pages, just by learning how to program a little bit. And there was free website hosts at the time. So that to me was just sort of a creative outlet. And the free site that you could use to host pages, they would put ads in the page.
Right.
So you wouldn't actually get control over the full page. And I can totally appreciate the irony of what I'm about to say, given that I work at Google now. But what I didn't like that because it kind of was it ruins the aesthetic to me.
Yeah, it kind of cheapens the website.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I found some vulnerabilities in how the free site was working, so that I could actually block the ads, and make my web page have the full content of the page. So that's kind of how I got into finding vulnerabilities, and I pursued that because it was interesting. I ended up doing an internship, kind of to learn more about security and what it might mean as far as the job goes, and then I just kind of snowballed from there. And I was lucky to meet a lot of friends, make a lot of friends in engineering. I eventually went to computer science because I liked programming and I wanted to learn more about how to do that. I met friends and we ended up doing projects kind of outside of class to get more into security. And I think it was a good mix of me having a social and network and also peers to do interesting projects with that kept me in it. And I think I was always just a little bit better at finding bugs in software than actually writing software. So in part, it was just probably easier for me to do that than find things.
It seems like whenever I think of people who are hackers, it's something they've been doing like their entire life. Like they were a 4-year-old, like breaking into a system somewhere. It seems like you're going from someone who's just kind of playing with the internet and figuring out what's going on in college to getting to the position you're at now is a very quick learning curve for you. Like, was there any particular thing that made you jump from kind of curious about it and you know enough to kind of know what's going on to you're the expert in the field? Like, what was it that that made that jump possible?
So I think it was, I think I've always had a curiosity and kind of an interest in making things, and breaking things. And before going into college, it was more in the physical medium. I remember gutting a TV once and making some sort of like fish tank aquarium, weird oddball art thing. So, I think there was always some part of me that did enjoy breaking things down, understanding how they worked, and also just creating things. And I think that aligns very well with engineering, whether it's building software and writing software or breaking it to ultimately make it more secure. I think, it was progressive. And I look at, I work hard and, I can be a little bit obsessive about certain things. And I really just gravitated towards security and wanting to learn more about this. I don't think there was any one, single point where I went from novice to expert. And I think that's actually something that I try to emphasize to people. I didn't know how to program at all when I went into college. And I recently met some girls who are about to graduate from high school, and they were really stressed because they didn't know what job they wanted to have. And I was like, don't worry about it. I didn't actually know what job I wanted. I graduated my senior year in college. I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So
I still don't know. So tell them they're fine.
That's I tell that to people too. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up because I think I've just always found if something's interesting, I'll get really into it. I'll focus in it. It happened to be security at the time, and I've continued to do that. But I've changed when I've changed jobs a couple times within Google to work on different pieces of software and take on kind of different approaches to what I do, from breaking software to now I'm managing a team and really thinking about kind of strategically what we can do to make security on the whole web better. Mm-hmm. So my advice to people is just kind of do what is interesting to you and try, as it takes hard work. So, it's not something that like you need to be a genius at, but you do have to put in a lot of time and discipline. And when you're not liking things, change. And I could totally see myself opening up like, a gelateria in a couple of years. So I'm not married to this security thing.
Gelateria / hacker space would be awesome.
Exactly. There you go.
So when you, I guess not as much now that you're managing a team, but when you were sitting down to like work on, like, find weaknesses and work on hackers, which I have to say, like, when I imagine your job, I think of it as like Sean Connery in The Rock. Like, they have to, only a thief can catch a thief kind of thing. So that's who I think you are. But, so what is it that you're looking for? Like, how do you get in the mindset of a hacker? Are you thinking, like, if I want to hack on this is what I would look for and this is how I'd go about and do it? Is that kind of what your job was?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of that. I think actually people anybody can do this. So I teach a class called Think Like an Attacker or Think Like a Hacker. And what we actually do to start off the class is not even use a software example, but say I usually will use the example of a vending machine. And let's say I task you or both of you to hack into a vending machine and try to get snacks out in a way, that is ripping off the vending machine. And I think people can actually use that example because everyone's used a vending machine. So the class is always really interesting because you get sort of the obvious answer first, like the sledgehammer attack. And
shake
and
the
then
machine.
You have people, exactly.
Yeah.
Shake the machine.
Reach my hand underneath through the thing. Hopefully it doesn't get stuck.
I put money in and hit the buttons, and it works every time, you guys.
Exactly. So it sounds like you guys are professional hackers.
It's the saddest. It is the saddest form of hacking.
It's a part-time job.
Yeah, and if you can, I think if you can go even deeper and start looking into like, well, what is the manual for this vending machine and how does it work? And it's very similar with software. You try to think of how could someone try to exploit or steal the assets of the system, whether it's user data or credit card information, and then you have to try to understand how the software works and try to find ways that maybe the developers didn't consider to block those things. So I think anybody can have the hacker mindset. I think depending on how cynical you are or kind of your view on the rest of the world, it may be easier for some than others. But you think about what are possible threats? What are the possible things people would want to steal? How would you go about doing it? How might others go about doing it? And then you figure out what defenses are in place to prevent those people from doing it.
So what are companies, like when we hear about Jennifer Lawrence's pictures getting hacked from the cloud or whatever, it seems like that's a very obvious thing that a bad person would want to do, steal pictures that are accessible somehow. What is it that Apple or whatever, if it's a credit card company or the CIA trying to save things from like Edward Snowden, whatever it is, what are they not seeing? I mean, it seems like, oh yeah, someone on the inside is going to want to get your stuff. It seems like that's something you would have covered when you were writing this stuff up. What are they missing?
Yeah. So I think, that there are certainly ways to kind of have assurance in software security. I know I use the internet and I use things without losing sleep and being in constant fear. But I think it's a good thing to remember that at the root of all of this, there's bad people and there's crime. And, you can think of like in the physical world as well, that we have a lot of, systems and people and even technology in place to protect us from, from terrorist attacks and from kind of, we have infrastructure in place to protect from really bad weather, but still sometimes these things, are flawed. And I think that's kind of something important to remember. There's, probably a popular press saying where if it bleeds, it leads. And I think a lot of stories that you hear about security are the bad stories. Just because, the fact that nobody got owned today using Chrome it's just not very exciting. So I think in part you hear about only the bad things.
Sure.
In part, we still haven't really figured out the great user experience for security online. We ask people to set a password as their gate for their account information, but it's not a really usable system to expect that people are going to remember a long string of random characters and also a different long string of random characters for every single site they go to. A really common hacker technique is if people they know that people reuse passwords, so they will compromise some weak sites, and then they see that, okay, this username has this password. Well, they're probably using the same password for their Gmail account, or for their, for their bank account. So that's sort of just, attackers taking advantage of passwords and kind of humans, maybe the reality that it's hard to remember a lot of different passwords. And it's not necessarily a weakness in the technology, but kind of the way it's set up. So, I don't know. I guess that's a long-winded and complicated answer, but I think that it is a complicated space. And as long as there's people with bad intentions, and more and more, assets that are available online, I expect that there is going to be some amount of crime and abuse that we'll have to deal with. On the flip side, I think that, tech software is in general more secure now than it ever has been. And as I said, I think, I don't lose sleep about buying things online or doing all of my banking online. It doesn't mean I'll never get owned, but I generally feel pretty safe. In the same way, it doesn't mean that my houses are never going to get robbed, even though I feel pretty safe.
Well, so what I think is interesting is I understand why a hacker is going to go after my bank account, although good luck, guys. You can just leave money there if you want. But what I think is interesting and frustrating is stuff that, like, and maybe it's from a lack of understanding of how technology works in general, which it wouldn't be the first time, but it seems to me a lot of the issues we run into aren't people trying to steal money or steal, like, personal information, identity theft. It's just people who seem to want to, like, wreak havoc. Like, the pictures that are leaked, nobody was making money off of that I could tell. Or, like, when my computer gets a virus that just makes it crash, I don't think anybody's, and maybe I don't know
They're
what
doing
a
it for
virus is.
shits and giggles,
Yeah,
more or less.
I feel like that's got to be even harder to protect against. Because, like, of course you want to protect your bank account because my money's in there. But what happens when people just, like, want to just jack shit up?
Yeah. So I think, I give this talk that is called the hacker spectrum, and I kind of talk about the different motivations and spectrum of attackers or hackers. There definitely are the ones who just want money, and some of those viruses and malware that get installed, they actually are making money. But what they'll do is sometimes they'll abuse ad systems and click on things or show you spam, and there's a revenue stream that way. It's also possible that they can just be using your computer to actually attack other systems, and that's where they would create like a botnet. So a lot of viruses and malware, there is a way to monetize that. But there are some groups or hackers that are only motivated by kind of making a statement. So I don't know if you guys had heard of Anonymous.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of this, So it's a little bit unsure what they are, how coordinated any of it is, but a lot of that movement is how you might call it a hacktivist movement, where they're really trying to make a statement just for the purpose of making a statement. And it is a really hard thing to defend against because, they're just trying to take a website down. Or compromise data to embarrass a company and make some statement. I don't know if there's a completely effective way of combating that, and that's also like it's as much a human problem as a technology problem. And then I think with the disclosure of celebrity photos, all of which I think were female. To me, this is like, why are there terrible people that abuse women in the world? And
right, which takes on a whole different problem.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly, which unfortunately happens in the real world and happens online too. So a lot of these things, it does make you, being in this space, it definitely makes me question human motivation.
Oof.
And I spend some amount of time thinking about, what could people possibly want to attack in the system, because that's how we prioritize, our defenses. But I think our approach in Chrome and in Google in general is to make the software as secure as possible from anybody that might try to get into it, independent of like what their
motivations are.
But by as secure as possible, I mean that we understand what it does, and nobody can use it in an unintended way.
Sure.
So, and in that case, then we can say it's secure because it's at least it only does what we want it to do versus someone being able to abuse it.
I actually did mean to ask you.
A little bit of an agnostic. Yeah.
I actually did mean to ask you, have you become more cynical as a result of working in this field? It sounds like you have.
Oh yeah, I don't know when I took a turn for the cynical, but I think I have definitely I take an approach to life of trust but verify, and I think I do see a lot of bad things, and that definitely shapes my perspective on the world. But I also see a lot of good things too, and I'm really happy working in Chrome. So Chrome is an open source project, and we have this mission, our team, to make Chrome the most secure way for people to browse the web. And I think that's a really inspiring mission. And we also will work on things outside of just the browser, but to push internet security forward. Like working on projects that don't even touch Chrome, but really try to make the web safer in general. So I think those are really inspiring and important. And I think that helps to balance the fact that, I see a lot of bad, but I'm also working with a lot of good people who are very motivated by this mission to just make the web a safer place to be, because you can do amazing things on the internet. And, if people are afraid to use it, then that's going to be a loss for everyone.
Right. I think bringing up the anonymous thing is really interesting, because I feel the way about anonymous the way I feel about like Michael Moore. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're trying to do, but you're going about it in such an awful way. What do you think? What do you guys think about anonymous?
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, they're effective at what they do.
I agree with most of what they say or think, but ugh.
Yeah, I think I think that it's unfortunate, right? Because it's unfortunate that it takes damaging, damage to people that probably aren't really at the root of like the point you're trying to prove, to make your point and make it so broadly. I think.
So if you want to make a statement about capitalism, going after Visa may not actually, you're not hurting the people who made the system, per se.
Yeah. And I mean, in the reality, you're probably, making the system administrators of the Visa website have to wake up and deal with this versus any of the people that kind of were setting, their corporate strategy. So
it's the same reason I tell people, if you go to a bookstore, stop putting the Bible in the fiction section. Yeah. I know what you're trying to do, but people have to go fix that later on for their own message. You're hurting the bookkeepers and the people working there, not the people who created the categories.
I know. It's why I try to be really kind to customer service of large companies that like give me such a headache, because I'm like, I know that these people aren't the ones that are trying to ruin my life, but they are the unfortunate buffers. So I mean, I think another thing that's important to keep in mind with Anonymous versus Michael Moore is he is one guy that we can attribute like all of his films to him, and he's happy to take credit for them. Anonymous is I think a bunch of people use that name. Right. And I don't think it's a very coordinated group. So it's hard to generalize, anything to think about that as an identity, because I do suspect that there's just a whole range of hackers that are...
Right. You can't just arrest Anonymous, because there isn't one dude sitting in a basement somewhere.
Yeah. Like the one guy who hacked Fred Phelps' Twitter or whatever that was, is like looking at the guy who did Visa, and it's like, come on, dude, like, don't use my name like that.
So do you guys ever, like, if you wanted to, could you hack into Safari and just cause chaos?
I think just because you can do something doesn't mean you
very,
should.
Very diplomatic.
High school prank.
Very diplomatic answer. How much damage could your team do if you wanted to? I mean, you guys are wearing these caps of... we want to make the world a better place. We want to create a browser that everyone can use.
The white hat.
Right, the white hat. And you've actually used that reference before. What could you do with the knowledge you guys have if you wanted to? Like, I'm sure there are bad people who are coming up to you like like the bad guy in Willy Wonka saying, like, come to my side and everything will be great.
Oh, yes, the everlasting Gobstopper.
Yes.
Truthfully, no one has come up to me, and maybe it's because I've pretty much made my ethics and stance on this pretty, I don't know, I mean, I'm pretty upfront with what I'm interested in working on and why. I think that, it's true that right now the market for security vulnerabilities, the knowledge to create, find security vulnerabilities and write exploits, which essentially can be weapons, and governments are interested in buying. There's a wide market for it, and you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars, literally, if you find a bug in a browser that is stable and easy to use. And that's probably, more competitive than what you could make at a tech company, for their salary.
Right.
So I think for me, it is an ethics and moral thing. And I don't really think about, there's a lot of things that I could possibly do. I'm sure that I could buy a gun and, do
right.
a lot of crazy things. It's nothing that crosses my mind.
Right. You could do it. It doesn't mean that's ever tempting.
Yeah. It's never been tempting. And I think that it's, I don't know, ignorance is not bliss in this space. And I think it's important to really think about, what can go wrong, what possible weaknesses there are in software so that you can ultimately build in better defenses. And yeah, just because you know how to find those weaknesses, doesn't at all mean that you would actually do anything with them. So.
Let's suppose, I had the skills. I somehow I exposed some vulnerability in Chrome. I was causing a mess. If you discovered that some group of people has actually hacked the thing that you were trying to protect, what is your game plan? Like, what would you guys do in that sort of emergency?
Get a posse together, right up to your front door.
So, there have been vulnerabilities discovered in Chrome. We actually have a vulnerability reward program. So if security researchers find bugs in Chrome and they let us know about them privately, give us a chance to fix them, we'll pay them money to do so. So it's actually, we support people looking for it, and we want them to tell us about it so we can fix users before they publicize it, but it's something that we actively encourage. Not everybody tells us about them, and in those cases where we find some kind of vulnerability in the wild, then we'll usually find out about them via some channel. Sometimes, it's from another company. Sometimes it's from someone, kind of a friend in the security industry. It's kind of small. We know a lot of people that, they are aware of some bug and it may impact Chrome too. And we have a role in our team called the security sheriff, and this person is the first line response for all incoming bugs and exploits, and they'll investigate it. There's a chat, IRC channel, which is kind of a large group chat for our whole team. My team is spread across 7 different offices, so that's one way for us to all kind of quickly figure out if this is an actual bug, where the bug is, what the best way to fix it is, and then we pull in other people from across the Chrome project. Sometimes we get a war room where people will convene kind of in person, and we'll figure out a plan for how to fix it and how to roll it out to users, how to roll the fix out to users, because just fixing the bug doesn't actually count unless you actually get that fix out to all the users. But Chrome is spread across over 20 different offices around the world, like from Tokyo and Sydney to, a lot of offices in Europe, to all over the U.S. So a lot of our meetings are over Google Hangout. We'll do kind of a video conference to plan all of this. And
would they call you up at like 4 a.m. and saying, we have an emergency, get on GChat right now or something?
I've gotten some calls. We also have pretty good coverage across time zones and a lot of awesome people. So thankfully, there's usually somebody that's up, and it doesn't require getting someone out of bed. But certainly there are people with pagers. And
Google at the top of technology right there.
And then, we figure out a fix, and Chrome has something called auto update. So it means that we can roll out an update to users, and they don't actually have to elect to install it. But the update we can push out, and anytime if they restart the browser, they'll actually get the update. So we have run through a couple of these exercises where we have to push out a critical security patch.
Oh wow!
And we've the fact that you said "oh wow" is hopefully means that you've never actually noticed it.
Right,
we can update
right.
people silently, and it's happened. We can push out an update to users and have people fixed within 24 hours, which is something we're really proud of.
Yeah.
Because a lot of software doesn't. A lot of software, they don't have that fast of response time, and they actually require users to install, click on install, and it's easy to just ignore that, or you have to restart your computer. So
familiar.
we spend a lot of time. Yeah. And
I'm just thinking
I also am reluctant to updating software. So
I'm just thinking out loud, on my phone, if I want to update Facebook, they push out an update every couple of weeks, but I don't know what they would do in the meantime if something happened immediately. And then I got to push install or whatever.
God, the horror.
I know. My life is very hard.
It doesn't sound like the sexiest security technology, but actually I think auto update is one of our best security features with Chrome, because updates are really annoying to install. And the fact that we can respond quickly and that people don't have to opt into them or get annoyed by them is one of our best ways to keep people safe.
Yeah.
So what are you managing now? So you're not in the hired hacker space. So what sort of team are you managing now?
So I still am. I just am a manager now instead of an engineer. So it means I've got about 25 hired hackers and software engineers that do a bunch of things to try to make Chrome safe. And I spend more of my time with people than code these days. So I think that's one difference in the job. We have some people who are trying to find bugs in Chrome and get them fixed. We also have people that are trying to make Chrome's internal architecture very secure. So we know that there's going to be some bugs, and we try to build in defense in depth so that even if there is one bug, there are other protections in place to mitigate, the damage of that one bug. And then we have another group that tries to make security more usable. And because security is a very human element, which is kind of what I've mentioned a couple of times. So they actually think about, how people are responding to security warnings or security interstitials, because if everybody's clicking through them, then they're not really being effective.
Right.
One of the things that we're working on, I'm sure everybody has tried to visit some site and they've gotten a warning that says this SSL certificate is invalid, or some kind of you often get it if you're at a hotel and you want to go through the hotel splash screen.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that a lot of people click through that, and we're trying to improve that because it's not being effective at protecting users. So they try to make security more useful.
Mm-hmm.
And my team in general thinks about how to make the browser more secure, because that's kind of the window that everybody uses to access the web. And then Chrome also just tries to make the large web more secure.
You don't have to give me specifics on this, but when you're hiring people for your team, what do they have on their resumes that you're like, yes, this is what are you looking for people who have a certain degree from college? Or could they just be like, I hacked a lot of stuff in my spare time at home?
Stop fishing for a job, Helen. It's tacky.
So I don't have, there's no subset of schools that I only look for. We have
major in hacking.
Diverse set of backgrounds on the team. Some people do have degrees from well-known universities, and some people are college dropouts or degrees in music. In the security space, a lot of work that you do, you can actually talk about. So often I will look for people with some practical experience. So either they've found vulnerabilities in software and responsibly reported them to software vendors, or they've done some interesting research in the space or written white papers about this. And that gives me a pretty good insight into what prior work someone has done.
Sure.
So I look closely at kind of prior work and experience over any kind of GPA requirements.
Yeah.
It's a little different for more junior people, but a lot of the people that come into my team do actually have a fair amount of experience.
So with that said, do you think computer science is something that should be mandatory in high school, now?
I think so. I wish I had taken a computer science class in high school or even earlier. I think certainly it would have helped me get into this space earlier. But so much of what we do and what drives society now is based in technology or should be. And I think programming is just such a powerful skill that can be applied to anything, whether you want to be an artist and kind of, leverage technology to create new forms of art, or whether you want to go into medicine and really, try to solve hard health problems based on all of, the data that we have, or push forward technology that could be used in healthcare. I just feel like there's so much opportunity, and the earlier you're exposed to that, the better. So I would love it if it was mandatory. I don't know. I wish I had gone into it at Stanford.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you did.
I did. It was not a good experience. I took Computer Science 1, not my favorite class.
Oof.
Well, I shouldn't have taken it senior year. That was the problem.
Yeah.
One last question for you. So when I go home to visit my parents now, they will ask me to fix all of their menial computer problems that any person should be able to figure out. I can't even imagine what people close to you ask you to solve for them.
So I will say two things on this. One, I am no better at debugging printers than the average person. I still find those to be the clunkiest and buggiest software ever. I used to, yes. I live in California now. All of my family is still in Chicago. So I go home 1 or 2 times a year. And a bunch of years ago, that always included me formatting their computers. They were, tons of malware and spyware on them.
Yeah.
I recently neither one of my parents are really, power computer users. They need email, they need the internet, and
same with mine.
Pretty much it.
Solitaire.
Sometimes they need to open a PDF.
Right.
So I got them Chromebooks, and
Nice.
Chromebooks they're very simple. They're maybe not for everybody, and that they don't have features necessary for everyone, but for them it's perfect. And they have not gotten malware since. If there's ever a problem, I just tell them to close it and open it, and you automatically get like this trusted boot version of it. So it's like the perfect solution for them,
Nice.
and I have not had to do any tech support since.
My mom downloads Indian music from the shadiest sites you can possibly find, and every time I come home, there are 90 new applications on her desktop screen. I'm like, how did these get there? Okay.
Yeah, you got to tell her. Give her the safe downloading talk. I mean, if you ever got the safe sex talk, talk about STDs and
Mom, I need to sit you down.
For you.
Oh my God.
Mom, I need to sit you down and talk about something very important.
Exactly.
Parisa, thanks so much for your time, and we will put links to all the things you're doing in your website at the bottom. So thank you again.
Good. Thanks. Have a good night.
Take care.
You too. Thanks for listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. This episode was taped at Cinnamon Sound Studios in Aurora, Illinois. The music was composed by Brad Chagdis. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a contribution at patreon.com/Hemant, that's He-Man-T. We appreciate your support. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at friendlyatheistpodcast@gmail.com. I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blumke. We hope you'll join us next time.